My name is Gusti Agung Masgitha, and now I will present about my research methodology with the title China's Investment in Belt Under Initiative, Debt Trap Diplomacy Case of Hamadotta Port in Sri Lanka. This is the table of the content of my presentation. The first part is background. My research question is how does China investment in Belt Under Initiative in Sri Lanka become a debt trap diplomacy? Independent variable, investment and loans in BRI, and then debt trap diplomacy as the dependent variable. One Belt, One Road initiative, or known as the Belt and Road Initiative, announced in 2013 by the President of China, Xi Jinping. It is one of the biggest foreign policy and economic initiatives of China to foster economic cooperation among the countries along the two economic corridors. Those are Silk Road Economic Belt and 21st Century Maritime Silk Road. There are 64 countries have agreed to cooperate and involved in this initiative, which are mostly located in Asia, Europe, and Africa continents. BRI is the joint development and the promotion of infrastructure investment initiated by China as the main state actor. China Development Bank as the main funder of this initiative fund more than 900 projects for more than $890 billion in 60 countries. China has the solution for the developing or less developed countries to provide financial support through giving them loans with simple requirements and is imposed according to the local laws without being strictly aligned with the debt trees of debtor states. Many countries have received loans, especially the developing countries, to support their large-scale infrastructure projects. Meanwhile, the low and middle-income economies are often lured by China's cheap loans and unable to keep up with the repayments. Then, it would be depend on China, and China would get the chance to demand a concession or get the advantage in exchange for debt relief. It is called the debt trap. The next part is what is the importance of this topic. First is the recent hot issue in global politics, and then few research or theses about this specific case. Next. The next part is review of related literature. So the first part is independent variable, China's investment and loans in BRI. BRI project of China has been one of the prominent economic projects in 21st century that involves various countries around the world. It is a new common topic in the international community, and many scholars have debated this issue with diverse political and economic perspective. There is less numerous literature about the specific contradiction of BRI impact that directly happens to a state. The case of Sri Lanka, which is considered as the real victim of BRI impact, is still rarely published in academic literature. Therefore, this research will discuss more about this specific case to fill the gap in academic literature and contribute to the development of state foreign policy reference. So, the definition of economic diplomacy. From the theory of soft power, it is derived a theory of economic diplomacy. Woolcock, Bain, and Turvey define that economic diplomacy is the arrangement and coordination of international financial negotiation of trade and investment and the development of international policies. Galito and Zhang explain that China's economic diplomacy is planned on long-term goals for greater control of regional and global influence. It proposed a win-win strategy that seemed less threatening but helpful for the other and also contributes to China's interests. Its economic diplomacy deploys strategies such as providing foreign assistance and increasing trade or FDI. It concluded that China's economic diplomacy is certainly for the purpose of national interest by influencing the other with the financial incentive. The weakness of this literature review is that there is only few trusted academic literature like journals and books regarding the practice of China economic diplomacy. The next part is the independent variable from empirical literature. Economic diplomacy through BRI. BRI, as one of the biggest foreign policy and economic initiatives of China, fostered the economic cooperation among the countries along the Silk Road economic belt. Many countries have agreed to cooperate in this initiative, which are mostly located in Asia, Europe, and Africa continents. In the practice of economic diplomacy, hate And Yakchi mentioned that China's economic diplomacy is conducted through BRI as its foreign economic policy to transfer the state into a trading power. It increased China's influence on international trade, deepens the regional economic integration, and expands China's free trade strategy. According to Rahman, Zhou, and Esteban, the participated states admire BRI vision and aspire to offer prosperity. It facilitates the trade between nations, becomes the flow of economic exchange, and it levers political value through economic priority. This literature has shown that China's economic diplomacy is proven to be success, since many participated states are willing to join the project. The research of this literature are quite accurate and comprehensive. Thus, it will be useful for my research as the academic literature that proves the success of China soft power among other states. The next part is dependent variable, debt trap diplomacy. According to Singh, Adriansa, and Wu, the term debt trap diplomacy was first coined by an Indian researcher named Brahma Salani. It is a strategy when a state lends an amount of money to a borrower state and aims to gain financial or political concession when the borrower state cannot repay. This term was created to refer to China's BRI investment by giving the participated state amount of loans to build infrastructure projects. The loans are often intended not to support the economy of participated state. Instead, it is better for China if the project doesn't go well. Wamanji and Oma also argue that China is strategically gaining influence over the weak state through this debt trap. Then China will gain the assets of the state as the concession of debt and will control its internal policy in politics. BRI project is considered as a strategy that gives negative impact for the participated countries, which actually cause a debt trap for the participated countries when they fail to do the repayment. The analysis of these sources shows that the myth of debt trap actually happens, and many scholars debated this topic as the new common issue in global politics. The comprehensive and detailed analysis of this literature will be the main framework of my research, since it's become the main supporting idea or perspective of my research field of China's debt trap. The next part is independent and dependent variable. China investment and loans in BRI become debt trap diplomacy. Through BRI, China managed to exercise its sources as the soft power to gain political and economic influences among the other countries that participated in BRI projects. According to Wibisono and Nurjayanti, the important aspect of soft power is when a state manages to influence other states to provide benefits for their own interests. They mention that through BRI, China can reach its interests by handling any global surcharge or the vulnerability of global economy, providing solutions and creating consensus among the participated states. They also argue that BRI is China's soft power oriented to economic diplomacy by relying on its economy and financial capacity. It gives China confidence in pursuing a project such as BRI that finance various projects in many countries. Meanwhile, Karai also argued that Sri Lanka with its Hamadatha port is the only exact example of the victim of China's BRI from soft power and economic diplomacy turning into a debt trap diplomacy. Wibisono and Nurjayanti mention the cause, that is because Sri Lanka agreed to receive the loans without a detailed analysis and consideration. Thus, Hambantota Port is leased to China as the debt concession. This literature concludes that the utilization of China's soft power in economic diplomacy is deployed through BRI, which is proven to cause a debt trap towards Sri Lanka. The research has proven that this case is a real phenomenon in global politics, and it will contribute to my research as the supporting arguments in creating comprehensive research to fill the gap in the existing literature. The next part is theoretical framework. So this is my conceptual diagram. From the first is independent variable, which is China's investment and loans in BRI or economic diplomacy, and then dependent variable, China's debt trap in Sri Lanka as the debt trap diplomacy, and both of the variable can be related through the foreign policy analysis. The next is the conceptual and operationalization of independent variable. So, economic diplomacy is the arrangement, process of decision-making and negotiation on policy that relate to the topic on international economic relation. The topic of this arrangement concern on international financial, negotiation of trade and investment, and the development of international policies. Therefore, economic diplomacy means that a state foreign policy that relates to its international economic relation with other states, with the objective is to achieve their common interest in economic field. Operational definition of economic diplomacy. According to Woolcock and Bain, there are three indicators as the measurement of economic diplomacy. The first is negotiation. Negotiation process between China's and Sri Lanka government regarding global investment and lending programs. China insists that its policy on the BRI through investment in Hambantota Port is purely for business interest. Second, voluntary cooperation. Through BRI, China utilized the foreign exchange with more profitable investment in foreign countries and established more cooperation with developed countries such as Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka is willing to cooperate with China, who gives them solution for its economy. The third, the creation and enforcement of binding rules. Economic diplomacy by China resulted in a bilateral agreement between Chinese and Sri Lanka government. Both states began negotiation on FTA in November 2014, and Sri Lanka conceived that it would provide better access of for export market and attract investment to the country. The concept of economic diplomacy theory is accordance with China's foreign policy through Belt and Road Initiative, in which the topic of this foreign economic policy is about the negotiation regarding the international financial and negotiation of trade and investment in Sri Lanka. The next is conceptual and operationalization of dependent variable. According to Adriancha and Wu, debt trap diplomacy is a strategy when a state lends an amount of money to a borrower state and aims to gain financial or political concession when the borrower state cannot repay. Operational definition of debt trap diplomacy. According to journal by Whitby Sono, there are three stages as the indicator of debt trap diplomacy defined by Parker and Savage. The first is investment. China investment of BRI in the Sri Lanka is conducted through the infrastructure investment of Hambantota Port. The main loan of this port is funded by the Exim Bank as China State Bank, which funded for $307 million. Second, detrimental effects of construction and operation. Most of the economic return and benefits of Hambantota Port directed back to China, which make debt repayment more difficult for Sri Lanka and cause the state become more dependent with China. Third, economic or political influence as debt collection. China's political intervention and close relation with Sri Lanka Prime Minister has succeeded to trap Sri Lanka under the high-interest debt and large infrastructure project of Hambantota Port, in which the port is leased to China for 99 years as the debt concession, and China has the control over the areas. The theory of debt trap diplomacy is certainly useful in accordance with China's debt trap case in Sri Lanka. The indicator of this theory could answer and explain the debt trap case because actually the term of this theory was firstly created to define China's policy of BRI in several countries in the world, which at the end became a debt trap case. The next is relationship between independent variable and dependent variable. So, foreign policy analysis is a guide of action taken beyond the state boundaries in order to achieve the goals of state. China foreign policy decision is created through the lens of issue that was so important to China domestic interests. Besides, the context of China's foreign policy seek to reach out other countries by emphasizing mutual benefits in doing things together through cooperation. Its foreign policy in economy is conducted through economic diplomacy with Sri Lanka in order to promote the Belt and Road Initiative, which create the mutual economic benefit for both states. This foreign policy through BRI aims to increase its global influence by connecting its econ- its neighbor economically closer. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka as the developing country which need economic assistance receive economic assistance from China through investment. However, from this economic diplomacy, it creates the notion of debt trap diplomacy as the foreign policy that results from China foreign policy on economic diplomacy through the BRI. It refers to China's strategy to gain financial or political concession when Sri Lanka as the borrower state cannot repay amount of money loaned by China. The next is scope and limitation of the study. The research will put China's investment and loans in BRI as the independent variable that has the role which affect the debt trap diplomacy in Sri Lanka as the dependent variable. And then the research mainly focus on the role of economic diplomacy implementation by China through BRI as China foreign economic diplomacy conducted in Sri Lanka. And China's investment in Hambantota port, which result in a debt trap diplomacy for Sri Lanka, become the main case of the research. The discussion begins in China involvement in Sri Lanka through BRI infrastructure investment in Hambantota port in 2015 until the fall of the port into Chinese hands in 2017. The next part is research method. Method is the set of techniques or how the data collected by the researcher in all science, while methodology is the identification and utilization of an approach to address a theoretical problem. In this research, the method that will be used by the researcher is the qualitative method. It is an approach to explore and understand the meaning of an individual, group, organization, or even in social reality or problem. It helps to better understand intangible factors in a specific problem, such as socio-economic status, the role of institutions or organizations, social norm, culture, and religion. It is the best approach to gain information and create analysis of the behavior of China towards Sri Lanka as a way of gaining economic interest through its economic foreign policy. The next part is the data sources are from the primary sources such as speech or remarks from certain people who are related to the topics of the research. Then it is from secondary sources like publication include books, journal, articles, magazine, news, online websites, and official government websites. In order to keep the quality of the data, the researcher also ensure the primary sources are supported by the secondary source as the main data sources. That's all from my presentation. Thank you.